I've been thinking about documenting my artistic process with this video, just going over the steps that I take when I prepare to make a painting. And one of the things is I work with the reference material first, whether it's the one that I take myself. I often go out on the field and take a lot of photographs, analyze to see what I like, what attracts me, what is an interesting point in a scene to focus on. And this is a very contemplative exercise. In this case, I have selected a few images of an English garden, as I would like to focus on an English garden, and I would like to contemplate various things about the English garden, what I like about it, what I think should be the focal point in my painting. And it really is just a contemplation first, getting ideas from the photos, getting ideas from nature, getting some kind of internal connection with the subject. Also, getting an imprint on the eyes of the subject matter so that the mind and the brain can play with it and come up with some kind of idea of our own. So as you can see in front of you, there is a picture of an English garden, and an English garden is characterized by being a little bit overgrown and not so structured. So it's kind of bushy. It's bushy, it's lush, it's fluffy, it's colorful, and it's just so delightful to be in and to spend time in, and it leaves such a beautiful imprint on your mind. At least on mine it does. And gardens and nature are my favorite thing. Landscape and flowers are the thing for me, and they attract me. And I really feel that I want to paint a scene when I see that, when I experience that. And I kind of want to express what I've seen, what I've experienced. This is what actually painting is about. If you are an impressionist painter, you get inspired by the light, by the colors, by shapes, by the feelings. Impression is a feeling. Impression is a quick glance. It reminds you of YouTube shorts these days. What they want you to do is a 15-second, up to 60-second video impression of what you're seeing. So in the same way, there is an impression, a photographic impression of a garden that somebody took from the angle that they really liked. So obviously, if we all take the same photograph, we might take it from a different angle with a different focus, and that's just fine. So what we can do, we can pick up a few images and take a look what really makes us tick, and then make a decision later. So first of all, we'll take a look at a few images that I have selected and just enjoy looking at them. You don't need to think too hard. Actually, thinking too hard doesn't work, because we're working with impression, we're working with inspiration, we're working with open heart. It needs to be something light-hearted and enjoyable. So tune into looking and enjoying, and I will just change the pictures. What I really like about this picture is that it has a lot of mauves and yellows, which obviously were planted next to each other on purpose as complementary colors. It would make these flowers pop. There is another very beautiful image, perhaps of orchids. And that's just very, very delightful, because orchids grow quite tall in fertilized environments, and the color is stunning. There are also really nice shapes of the foreground bushes. Some are circular, and some are kind of radiating, the leaves are radiating from them. And it's just so beautiful to see all these radiating leaves. The leaves of the orchids, these leaves, they're all going in different directions, creating a flow. And the colors are gentle, very gentle on this picture. And here we're seeing quite an overgrown scene close to the fence. Very delightful, with various pinks versus green, which make pink pop up even more. Red and green are complementary colors yet again, so that is the focus here, with various wispy stems of the flowers, in contrast with the bushy nature of the flowers themselves. Here we have a garden path that leads somewhere. And of course, we want to explore where it's going to lead. And that's why we take that kind of photo, as it's a photo of a journey. It's a photo that takes the eyes and the mind somewhere beyond. And here, once again, beautiful shrubberies, beautiful overgrown flowers, and the sense of richness and lushness. Obviously, this photo has been enhanced. It's a little bit bright to be real. But if we are thinking about it in an abstract way, it's totally fine, because abstract art focuses on bright colors rather than definite shapes. So the play is around colors. And this is just something to appreciate. Just think about what it is that you like, what attracts you. In this particular photo, we are seeing, in a sense, an all-over composition. An all-over composition is where the entire screen is filled with paint, filled with images, and now we have photography that is able to capture this kind of composition. But in the past, a lot of Impressionists and others, also abstract expressionists, played with an all-over composition where they fill every single inch of the canvas with brush strokes. And that's what we're seeing here. It would make a really great painting if you want to fill the whole canvas with paint, and it would be really fun. And of course, these beautiful pink flowers versus the green flowers and yellow, very attractive. Once again, we're seeing a composition which is all over, filling the entire screen. And here, of course, we can notice that it is all about the colors. The purples, the mauves versus yellow creates a very strong Van Gogh style complementary colors effect, and I really quite like the feel of it. Another photograph that I really liked, it does have a water feature, but we can ignore that if we want to. Again, of various flowers growing tall, and a lot of stems in this one. A lot of stems are visible. Beautiful combination of colors, of course, everything is on purpose. And I'm just talking about the foreground. I'm not really looking at the background. I'm just selecting what I really like about this photo. So it could be something really inspirational. And since I'm planning around three paintings, so it could be one of them. So in this way, we have taken a look at our references. What we're going to do now, we will go over some Monet paintings, just to take a look at what I would like to focus on. As you can see, these are later period Monet paintings that became quite abstract. And one of the reasons they became abstract is that Monet had cataracts. And because of cataracts, he couldn't see clearly. So Monet is the father of all abstract art, and it started by accident. He started to lose focus. The vision became blurry, so it became his paint. So it became the paintings. The paintings became less concrete and more abstract. The shapes have become a lot more abstract. The brush strokes became more abstract and more blended. I have a specific interest in the way I'm showing these paintings in sequence, and I just want you to pay attention to the brush strokes that are quite wispy. They've become quite wispy and really connected, and it's sort of like almost a dance of with a brush and continuously painting these rounded lines, lines upon lines. So now we're really approaching the abstract colors here, and definitely you can see abstract expressionists following in the footsteps of Monet. The lines, the abstract colors that make up an expression rather than an impression of the scene. Now we will go a little bit towards Impressionism, but I would like you to pay attention to this canvas. And you can see the right bottom corner has been left um, quite unpainted. And again, this is the beginning of the technique where the artist leaves parts of canvas unpainted just to give an effect. This technique was widely explored by Matisse. But again, the forefather of the technique is Monet. We are all familiar with Monet's water lilies. We've seen a lot of images on the internet, and I'm wondering if you have seen this particular painting, that the water lilies pond has been reduced to a very abstract painting. So on the screen you see a portion of this painting. As you can see, a lot of canvas has been left unpainted. And again, we have a bunch of abstract brush strokes, which is quite a deviation from his typical way of painting. But you can see that this is the beginning for the abstract artists, abstract expressionists especially, to start painting in the way that they did. So we're seeing a sequence, we're seeing a lineage, we're seeing the huge impression that Monet has made on the American artists who actually came to France to be inspired and they've seen Monet and they've realized that the inspiration is immense, and they started to create their own things. They didn't want to be copying French. They didn't want to be realistic. They wanted to get away from concrete ideas and notions, and they wanted to express something else. And this is the next painting that I'd like you to pay attention to, where the landscape has become quite abstract, by Matisse. He's just gone for the space of the canvas being exposed with brush strokes indicating everything else. This focus on space also comes from Japanese and Chinese tradition that see space as an important ingredient of a painting. And we can see the same effect here. Brilliant colors, brilliant brush strokes, and the canvas exposed in many ways to shine light. This is one way we can use the white canvas or the canvas in a lighter color to create its own tone, to create the shining through. Or we could use a darker color to dull the whole thing down. I don't paint dulling things down. I prefer the light to shine through. So we will focus on brighter color of the canvas in this instance. From Matisse, I'd like to go over to Joan Mitchell. Joan Mitchell is an American abstract expressionist, and she went to Paris and she got inspired by Monet, and she famously realized that there was nothing left to paint after what he has painted. He's done it all. So in her mind, she started to merge her inspiration by nature and her inspiration by Monet and other Impressionists. So as a result, we have Joan Mitchell's landscapes. Characterized by her own brush strokes that are still similar to Monet's, but just taken a little bit more abstract and bold. So here is where we see, again, using the space of the canvas as the light source, leaving it the way it is, and a whole bunch of brush strokes. And let's take a look at this one. So we have the shining canvas and the brush strokes. Bright, cheerful, quick, dynamic, very expressionist. The next artist I'd like to focus on is Jorge Galindo, a Spanish artist who obviously is following the footsteps of abstract expressionists and Monet as well. So his favorite topic is flowers and obviously roses. There's a lot of space left on the canvas unpainted. Adherence to the Japanese and Chinese topic of suspending an object in space and having space as an important focus. And the lines, the shapes, and the abstract colors. So yet again, Yet another painting, oversized flowers, bold brush strokes, more like Chinese or Japanese tradition. Most likely painted on the floor, like he does a lot of the paintings. So if the painting is painted vertically, it obviously doesn't have any drips. I believe there is a similar painting that Matisse has, and again, there's leaving the canvas not fully blocked in, letting the white canvas shine through, and focusing on the large shapes just quickly with a thin paint, which is so very Matisse. And so very Monet as well. Now here we definitely see the influence of the ink painting from Japan and China, and the concept that of painting with ink on paper. So this definitely looks like paper. And we have these big blots, most likely painted on the floor. Lots of dancing, lots of mixing color right on the brush and on the canvas. And here is something bright and cheerful. Galindo uses different pieces of paper or fabric attached to the canvas to create interest. And as you can see here in this part, there's colorful fabric, floral fabric that has been attached. Now we're starting to see him going furthermore towards abstraction. It's obviously a semblance of a bouquet in a vase, maybe with a handle, maybe not. So obviously lots of space, lots of light shining through everything. And let's close off by the artist and together with his painting, just to appreciate the size and the nature of his work and the fun that he's having more so. You see, a lot of these paintings, because of their large size, they're extremely fun to paint. There's a freedom of movement, there's freedom of space, there's a freedom of expression, there's the dance, the mixing of the colors separately, and it's one of the best things. It's just having a great fun. Hello, and once again, I would like to continue talking about my artistic process, how I start painting. And actually, it's a very spontaneous video. It is something that I have not prepared too much beforehand. I have not thought too much about it, and I'm just using my little notepad to keep my thoughts together, because it's kind of a struggle to stay logical when your mind starts to go spatial. We've discussed a lot of things on at the time when we were looking at photographs of famous artists, paintings, when we were looking at the references of the English garden. I want to touch upon the selection of paints, and I'm going to go for acrylic paint. I do love oil paint as well, very much. I like it for its buttery, glossy look. And it's an unhurried way of painting because you don't need to hurry. It doesn't dry very quickly. And it's just beautiful. It blends. It creates a lot of wonderful effects. And to me, it's really easy to use. However, acrylic paint has got its own benefits, and one of the biggest benefits that it's relatively non-toxic. You do not need smelly solvents and drying retarders. These are quite toxic materials. They require good ventilation, they require a separate space, and they're not very friendly in confined spaces and smaller spaces where a lot of beginner artists paint. And if you remember history about Van Gogh, this is something that was really making him sick, the paint itself, the paint and the other materials. So in this sense, acrylics are the choice for me. They're also quick, they're easy to dry. They are not something to worry about when you use them on unprimed canvas or primed canvas. And primed canvas is a must for oil paint because oil paint seeps through the canvas and can actually go through it and damage it if the canvas is unprimed. Here we can even prime the canvas directly with acrylic color of our choice, or get a special colored primer, or just use a normal white primer. But in our case, the canvas is already primed, so with white primer we don't need to worry about it. Acrylic paint resembles glue. It's stable once it's dried. It dries very quickly. We can dilute it to very thin consistency with water only, or we can just use it thick straight from the tube, which is another nice way. And we can of course use a bunch of different instruments like palette knives. So in this case I have the Liquitex brand. Or there are brushes of various kinds. And of course all techniques can be used with acrylic paint. Next thing I would like to talk about, which I already touched upon in other videos, is white canvas versus tinted canvas. It's all about what kind of undertone do we want to set for the painting. Do we want it to be extremely abstract and modern and colorful? In that case, we can leave it as white. White will be the brightest color in the palette, so we need to think about how we're going to use the rest of the colors, as we already have the strongest white on our canvas already done for us. If we want to create a tint, you will notice that a lot of canvases of Monet and Van Gogh have a slightly gray-pink color. This was the time in history when canvases were tinted in that particular color, so the canvas would appear a little bit earthy, a little bit closer to the earthy landscape which it was used for. So, which of course is very advantageous, and you notice how you feel when you look at these paintings. You feel really grounded. You feel you are close to nature, because that's the impression that this color creates. I have done paintings with a very thin, diluted, very bright yellow, and that creates a sense of a sunny, bright day, and that yellow shines through all other colors. So that's another great idea that can be used. I have not experimented with too many other colors, but I have done a red underpainting, and that was because I was being inspired by a Van Gogh bouquet of flowers, of roses. They were really red, and I wanted that red to shine through everything on the painting. Now I'd like to mention composition. Composition, how objects are arranged on canvas. Obviously, we've been looking at a lot of paintings where space was the key. So the space of the canvas is the one that holds the objects on it. In this case, the grasses, the trees, the flowers, the water features, whatever it might be. So it's up to us. Do we want to explore that space of Japanese and Chinese landscape, which is quite fun. It definitely gives you a perception of spaciousness and openness. On the other hand, we could use an all-over composition which just clutters everything with brush strokes, which is so lush and fabulous and immersive. So it kind of draws you into all of the maze of brush strokes. Another thing to think about is if we are going to use the white background, which we probably are. However, we can tweak things as we go along because it's easy to do with acrylic paint. What colors do we want to contrast? Is it going to be the black? Is it going to be the dark blue? Or is it going to be the darker red? Or that we have to be aware of, since white is the color of the highest contrast. Again, when we think about the subject matter, about what we are going to paint, are we going to leave all the objects of the size that they really are, like all the grasses and flowers, or like Galindo, we are going to magnify them beyond their proportions, because most of his paintings are 3 by 3 meters, so you can imagine the roses look huge. So what do we actually do? How do we play with our objects? What sizes do we want? That's something to think about. Also, when we look at the reference photos, there's quite a lot of stuff there, and we do not need to paint everything that we see. We can choose, pick, we can remove, we can add, we can pick ideas from one photograph to another photograph and merge them into one, or we can just pick a small detail and just go along with that. It really all depends on the choice and the mood. And the last bit I would say would be to visualize the painting. The way I visualize the painting, it's not really visualizing in the sense like I see the objects of daily life. It's a bunch of impressions in my mind's eye to do with imagination. So imagination based on what I actually liked, which is the photo references of nature. So contemplating those and letting them getting impressed in on my eyes, on my mind, on my brain. Then obviously picking the artists in this instance that I would like to be inspired by. And in this case, I've looked at Monet, I've looked at Matisse, at Joan Mitchell and Galindo, and I can see the common thread there. At the same time, I can see the artists having gone their own way and developed their own style and their own color scheme and their own tones and ideas and all of that. So can I create something which is a continuity of the great artists, which of course it will be because I'm already inspired by their paintings. I'm already imprinted with that information. So that information in combination with the reference photos is what's going to create my painting, which is going to go here. However, actually what needs to happen, a time needs to be spent contemplating the reference photos, looking and deciding and maybe cropping on the computer the parts that are really nice and that will stand out well. Remembering the techniques of the artists that you've selected and kind of going over in your mind what it is that you really would like to try or to use. At the same time, you have to keep in mind the quantities of the paint you have. Paint does cost money, and if you do not have access to a lot of paint, so obviously it's better to paint thinner and more transparent, and plan for it so that you have enough paint to do that. In my case, I do have enough paint, but I wanted to focus on the transparency, on the light, on not the impasto, not the thick paint application techniques, because that creates a focus on structure. And I don't want to focus on structure. I want to focus on the light, on the lightness, on the mood, on the dance, on the qualities of enjoyment, which is all to do with lightness and movement. So I would like to do that. Let's also touch on the position of the canvas, whether it is positioned on the floor, positioned flat on the wall, like mine is here, and versus easel. Easel is the traditional way of painting. It requires a stretched canvas, and it requires probably all the precise techniques that are being used in portraiture and realism. Here we're not going for realism or portraiture or the stretched canvas, pre-stretched canvas. We're going for a big flat sheet that would be sitting very nicely on the wall, flush with the wall, touching it literally. So when we paint, we will be painting against a very hard surface, which, unless you have a board on the easel, instead of stretched canvas, you will let your canvas stick to the board. You can achieve the same result, but oftentimes the easel needs to be really huge to accommodate a huge board to do that, and obviously it's kind of a luxury. So it's very easy to utilize a wall for that same purpose. However, if you like painting on an angle, which is the traditional way of painting, you will need large easels and special room, a studio to do all of that. And it can be quite costly, and it's a very dedicated way of work. And at this stage of my life, I don't really require that, and I'd like to be free and I'd like to be flexible. In this way, if I travel wherever I go and I get a wall, I could enjoy myself and make a painting. Another fun way to paint is, of course, on the floor. This is where you're completely not constrained by limitations of being vertical, standing in front of your canvas or your wall in that way. So you can dance, you can step over your paint, you can leave footprints, just like abstract expressionists did. Jackson Pollock, he did a lot of dripping, a lot of pouring, a lot of dancing, a lot of smoking over his canvas, which I don't smoke, but you could, really enjoy yourself that way, and a lot of artists do. So in that way, you will see this distinct difference between a vertical canvas. A vertical canvas will have drips. If you use the paint too thin, the drips will flow down, obviously due to gravity. But the canvas that is flat on the floor will tend to have pools of paint. It will be easier to use the dripping paint on, and it will stay pretty much the shape you want it to stay. So it's really up to you. Of course, you need space for the large floor canvas, and you will need larger brushes, and you will need to be dexterous and aware of that kind of thing, and that's totally fine. In this instance, I'm going to focus more on the brush strokes, so I'll be using brushes. I will probably be using some palette knife, but I'm not sure yet, maybe not. It will all come to me when I think through the final concept of what I'm going to do. And when I do that, I will be thinking about selection of colors. So I will take a look at my tubes of paint, and I will select those ones that I will work with. And after that, I will then make a little bit of reference sketch in the sense of how the colors will look together. However, because these are acrylic paints, you can paint over them A lot of things can be corrected and changed, and the process is very fluid and very creative. Let's also touch on the position of the canvas, whether it is positioned on the floor, positioned flat on the wall, like mine is here, and versus easel. Easel is the traditional way of painting. It requires a stretched canvas, and it requires probably all the precise techniques that are being used in portraiture and realism. Here we are not going for realism or portraiture or the stretched canvas, pre-stretched canvas. We're going for a big flat sheet that would be sitting very nicely on the wall, flush with the wall, touching it literally. So when we paint, we will be painting against a very hard surface, which unless you have a board on the easel, instead of stretched canvas, you will let your canvas stick to the board. You can achieve the same result. But oftentimes the easel needs to be really huge to accommodate a huge board to do that. And obviously it's kind of a luxury. So it's very easy to utilize a wall for that same purpose. However, if you like painting on an angle, which is the traditional way of painting, you will need large easels and special room, a studio to do all of that. And it can be quite costly, and it's a very dedicated way of work. And at this stage of my life, I don't really require that, and I'd like to be free and I'd like to be flexible. In this way, if I travel wherever I go and I get a wall, I could enjoy myself and make a painting. Another fun way to paint is, of course, on the floor. This is where you're completely not constrained by limitations of being vertical, standing in front of your canvas or your wall in that way. So you can dance, you can step over your paint, you can leave footprints, just like abstract expressionists did. Jackson Pollock, he did a lot of dripping, a lot of pouring, a lot of dancing, a lot of smoking over his canvas, which I don't smoke, but you could, really enjoy yourself that way, and a lot of artists do. So in that way, you will see this distinct difference between a vertical canvas. A vertical canvas will have drips. If you use the paint too thin, the drips will flow down, obviously due to gravity. But the canvas that is flat on the floor will tend to have pools of paint. It will be easier to use the dripping paint on, and it will stay pretty much the shape you want it to stay. So it's really up to you. Of course, you need space for the large floor canvas, and you will need larger brushes, and you will need to be dexterous and aware of that kind of thing, and that's totally fine. In this instance, I'm going to focus more on the brush strokes, so I'll be using brushes. I will probably be using some palette knife, but I'm not sure yet, maybe not. It will all come to me when I think through the final concept of what I'm going to do. And when I do that, I will be thinking about selection of colors. So I will take a look at my tubes of paint, and I will select those ones that I will work with. And after that, I will then make a little bit of reference sketch in the sense of how the colors will look together. However, because these are acrylic paints, you can paint over them. A lot of things can be corrected and changed, and the process is very fluid and very creative. There is another topic that I would like to focus on, and that's the topic of how do we get into that mood, into that space of mind to paint, and how do we stop hesitating, how do we stop overthinking, and how we stop criticizing ourselves and all that useless, unnecessary stuff that goes on very often in the mind and in the hearts of all artists. All that agonizing. Actually, I find it quite simple. And that's because I have the knowledge and appreciation of the functioning of the brain hemispheres. And the brain hemispheres, left and right. So there's a difference. Left is responsible for speech, right is responsible for imagination, spatial perception, and seeing perspective. So when we name something, we say it's a tongue, it's a mouse, it's a nose, it's a flower, it's a garden bed. We are naming objects, and our left brain is working, and we already have preconceived ideas of how those objects should look. And therefore, we are deprived of an opportunity of freshness, and we often miss proportions. We do not use the right colors, or all sorts of other mistakes that creep in because we are overshadowed by this left brain naming thinking. So instead, we are going to shift into the right brain functioning, and right brain functioning works on relationships. How this line is close to this line, how this brush stroke is contrasting this brush stroke. So we're not naming the things, we are working with them abstractly as lines, as brush strokes, as marks, as different colors, and we can discuss this on that basis. Oh, what else I can do? What do I like about this? How is this? You know, we stay with the enjoyment and appreciation of the entire painting, what we're doing, but we can make some basic preparations in the active beta brain waves in the logical mind and the left brain hemisphere by preparing the paint, laying it all out, preparing the brushes, laying them all out, getting the bucket ready with water, preparing everything we need so that when we actually start painting, the process is easy, it flows, everything is handy, and all we have to do, we have to be aware of what we are doing on the canvas, rather than try to think, oh no, I forgot this one, or I don't have this one, and that interrupts the flow. And if you cannot get back into the flow easily, then it sort of spoils your mood and makes you be dissatisfied. So how do we get into the right brain space? First of all is by stopping to name objects, is by breathing. Abdominal breathing works very well, by putting on your favorite music, because you start becoming aware of the music and your right brain starts to be aware of spaciousness in the room, spaciousness in the canvas. We need to slow down. We need to stop talking, obviously, talk less. But when we do need to talk to ourselves, just use the language that is to do with brush strokes, to do with lines, to do with marks, to do with shapes, and keep it as abstract as possible. Of course, it's a matter of training, and it takes time. It takes time to do it, just to train the perception of space and be in the alpha brain waves, and that you can learn by going to my website and purchasing a program. And when I start to paint, you will see what I do, and you could pick some ideas from that as well. But you could also read the book by Betty Edwards, Painting on the Right Side of Brain, and she talks about how to get into that spacious attitude, and she proves to you that you can do it. But I would like to say, keep in mind the most important thing is enjoyment and relaxing. When you are enjoying and you're relaxing, you're kind of there already, because you're not here necessarily to bash out something fabulous and mind-blowing and discover something that no one else has discovered. The first thing that, let's say, as a landscape painter, that impressed you was the enjoyment of the scene. So remember that. Remember what about that scene that you liked and made you feel happy, made you enjoy, stopped your mind, to be honest. So keep that in your heart, keep that as your anchor, and keep returning to it. What was it that you really loved? Was it the color? Was it the shapes? Was it the maze? Or what is it that you saw? Just keep going back there, keep contemplating that, and see if the feeling that you got then is the feeling you are getting in touch with right now, because that's really what's going to make your painting. And first and foremost, you're making this painting for yourself. This is how I approach it anyway. I'm making this painting for myself. I have to be happy with it. So if I can capture the mood, the impression, or the expression of the scene, I will be really happy with it, and I will decide that this is enough. As we go along with the painting process, I will show you what I do, and by all means, take whatever you like, apply it to yourself, come up with your own ideas. This is a creative process, and this is a process where you are your own master. If you don't like something, you don't need to do it. If you like something, you can overdo it. It's all up to you. So I look forward to going through the painting process when I finalize my decisions. But the next thing we're going to do once I do that is selecting paints. So I'll see you later.